Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Addicts Podcast Season 2. We were actually on episode 16, and they haven't booted me off yet, so I guess we're doing good. My guest this week is Michael Huntington. Michael, the way we always start out is I just let the guests introduce themselves to the audience. So just introduce yourself to everybody, and we'll get rolling.
Okay. Well, my name is Michael Huntington. I live in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. I hail from St. Louis, Missouri, originally. And I guess I'm on here because of my research and interest in a variety of paranormal subjects, from ghosts to cryptids to especially UFOs, which I have been active as a researcher pretty much every day for the past 48 years. So I go back to the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. I was a member of that organization, which ceased to function in the mid 80s. So that gives you an idea how old I am. Although I'm not quite 60. When I began my interest in the mid 70s, I was a kid, and I was influenced heavily by my mother, who's still around, and the culture of the time period, the 70s, UFOs and Bigfoot and ancient astronauts in search of Project UFO, all these, close encounters of the third kind, all that stuff influenced me. And I was pretty much immersed in it, just as part of my personality, and it's stayed with me, and it's stuck with me, and I have been able to observe the history of these different subjects and these different cultures and the personalities, from a perspective of nearly 50 years. I met a lot of the interesting authors and characters, and watched all the shows and read all the books and the newspapers and all that sort of stuff. So I'm coming from a research, mostly perspective, mostly from the UFO background. I also have been doing mapping projects. I have what's called the Anomalous Mapping Project, where I have it's mostly a great tool for myself and other researchers. I encourage other researchers to do this. The best way to learn the subject that you're claiming expertise in, whether it's ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, or whatever, you have to research these cases. And if you want to speak with expertise, you have to get into the details of them. And I found that the best way to get into the details of cases is to pinpoint their positions on a map. And if you can pinpoint where a Bigfoot stood, or where a UFO landed, or where people see ghosts persistently over long periods, I map that sort of stuff. It's a great way to learn. If you can map things down to, I think, a square foot, I think it's a good demonstration that the case enough, at least the information to be able to do that. Plus, it's a tool, I think, that it should keep us as researchers going. You constantly have to keep researching, not just being part of the culture and going along with it. I mean, there's that as well, and you certainly don't have to go the other route. You don't have to be a celebrity and try to be getting a TV show all the time. I'm in it for the research. That's what I focus on, and I encourage that. And I map, and I visit these locations as well. I love when people say, "Oh, like." It's mostly like noobs to these subjects from like 5 years ago, and they're coming at me like, "Oh, you don't do anything. You're just like on the computer. You're just an armchair warrior." And it's like, Well, where do you think a lot of the information is nowadays? You have to communicate and you have to interact, and there's a lot of information that's available. Uh, but I'm not armchair. I go to these places. I've gone to many hundreds of haunted locations, cryptid encounter locations, and UFO encounter locations. Many historic ones, mostly in the Midwest, because this is sort of a passive, just a lifestyle sort of venture thing, right? See what you can find along the way as me and my family have traveled. You can see a lot of that stuff on blogs under hashtag strange travels. There's a lot of those stories of places that we found and documented for people over the years on like Instagram and just Google, my name in different spots, and some things will come up. And but mostly I'm in it for the research, and I do share research locations and information for people that are trying to uh, do research or go and explore these places and document these places. Another reason is, a lot of these spots change and disappear, especially haunted locations. There's a lot of buildings that are getting torn down, and haunted houses that are getting torn down, and cemeteries that are getting grown over. So, we have to periodically go back to these spots and document them so that the history is not lost. But also, just locations interest me also as a researcher, because you see patterns and you wonder why certain things are localized in different places. Why is it tied to a location? Why does a ghost haunt a house? Whatever the phenomena is, whatever the cause is, but like, why is it tied to that location? What is it that physically, because we exist in a physical universe, we experience all of these anomalies and these phenomena through our physical lenses, right? So it's perceptual through us.
Right.
How how does that happen? And I think by mapping out these spots and then seeing when there are places where they sort of just coalesce and go beyond just mere probability and just beyond folklore sort of things. There's places like Skinwalker and Marley Ranch and Grand Tower, which I did a documentary that people can check out on Tubi to kind of see this approach. We're trying to get back to also with some of these documentaries to try to encourage more focus on the subject and not on the conspiracies and the politics and the characters, people trying to make careers, because that stuff sort of corrupts and the information gets lost and manipulated a lot, I think, by a lot of these personalities. So
Right.
us serious researchers want to try to keep it factual, and we want to try to get this stuff, this information locked down. But I'm also I'm trying to put all the all my stuff in here. But I've been in other documentaries. I've been in some small town monsters stuff. I did the Momo documentary. I've done the
Which I've actually saw that one. That's how I first knew about you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's well. Seth is, I've been friends with him for a while, and he's a good guy. He pays homage to the local lore, which is something else that I think that we do is we're trying to get this local lore categorized and recognized and preserved and researched. And if there's stuff going on there, we want to try to see if there's any evidence, because it's all about localizing phenomena. Because if you're going to be able to, if you want to study something scientifically, or even if you want to experience something metaphysically, you have to localize it. You have to be there. You have to go to the location where these phenomena occur, and you have to try to interact with the phenomena. However, depending on what you're there for. Some people are just there for experience. Some people are there to gather data. Some people are there within a lot of these paranormal cultures, you have a group, and there are different groups, and there's a social network that exists within these subcultures as well, and there are sometimes there's competing groups, and there's people with different ideas of things and different interpretations. And I'm sure later on you're going to ask me the big questions, and I'm just going to say right now, as a researcher, I look at every single case on its own merit. The witnesses on their own merit, the evidence on its own merit, because it's not, you can't just say this exists because of the totality of the cases, because there are hoaxes and there's BS in there. We know that stuff exists, right? So we have to go through these cases, and we have to determine which are good cases, whether they're ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, whatever, what has the best evidence that we're not loading up with bias. And the goal is not to convince ourselves, because we're already convinced, right? Exactly. We go to these places and we experience the paranormal, but experience is not evidence. It's evidence in say a human sense, where you're giving testimony, but scientifically speaking, it's very limiting. You're basically begging the question by saying that I experienced something anomalous. Exactly. You're not providing the answer unless you provide your own biased interpretation. And different places will have different causal things as well, and there's a lot of crossover between, these UFOs and ghosts and all that. Is an orb a UFO or is it a ghost? What if it gains an altitude? Is there a certain level where a ghost, if it gets high enough, does it become a UFO? I kid, but there's just these crossover of phenomena, and I'm interested in these places that are localized, so we can limit the transient nature of them, so that you can research them and understand. And I think a lot of things have probably mundane and prosaic explanations, at least within the UFO world. Like 90% of claims and cases over the past 75 years have been prosaic, meaning they have a likely explanation. But you're still dealing with large numbers, so you still have that 10%, and a lot of that's probably due to low information. So we can shrink that down. We can shrink that down basically down to the 1%, and that's what I'm interested in. Those intriguing cases that are we can speculate and try to understand what's going on, whether or not something is real, what are the likelihoods of things based upon known information, and it's all about, sorry, cat attack. It's all about getting as much information as possible, whether you're a skeptic or a believer or whatever. And it's case by case, because this haunted house over here may have nothing to do with this haunted house over here, right? They may both be haunted, but there may be different causal things. So, you sort of have to look at things case by case. And I encourage that. And you can see the patterns, and the patterns where we can try to mitigate, the transient nature of these things.
I agree with everything you just said there, Michael. The thing is, I do everything from a scientific standpoint too. I like to do this. I was actually born as a, with a gift to be able to see and communicate. But when I investigate, I like the scientific evidence, especially if I'm doing like a residential, because it's a lot easier to come up to a homeowner and be like, this is what I captured. This is the EVP I got. This is what I captured on the thermal camera. It's a lot easier to present that than just to be like you said, this is what I feel, because there's people out there that's going to say they feel stuff when they don't, because they want to be famous or whatever. So I like the scientific. So we're not even going to get to the icebreaker questions today, Michael. We've already got questions from the Peanut Gallery.
Okay.
So, cool. Damien's a good friend of mine and of the network. Damien is actually from Scotland, but so he always has really good questions. He actually has two for us already. So let's start with his first one. He says, "Have you noticed much influence between landlines and UFO activity, or is it our little friend interested in it?"
Yeah, ley lines are interesting. It's basically if you haven't read over the years what ley lines are, I'm talking to your audience out there. Is basically the idea that there are these lines, sort of like an interconnected lattice that circulates the earth. That may be a natural construct or an artificial construct, but at these intersections of this web, so to speak, people have claimed that you can find something phenomenological there, something anomalous, or something that is connected to folklore or legend, or some sort of site or whatever, and it's an intriguing sort of thing. There's also the idea of parallels, 37th parallel, 38th, 30. You can pick different parallels and see if there's patterns. And some people believe that certain lines can be seen that are in alignment with longitude and latitude. And of course, you also have historical locations that are anomalous. You have your Bermuda Triangle, your Devil's Triangle, you have your Bluegrass Triangle, you have your Michigan Triangle. And then you also have, within all of those places, you have hot spots. You have localized places where, like Skinwalker and Marley Woods and Grand Tower, places where there's perhaps a large collection of at least claims or lore scattered about different places. And the idea, and a lot of these have been speculated about, since the 70s. Is there some sort of lattice of connection between these anomalous spots? And I think the answer is pretty much anywhere that human beings have been, you can find something anomalous. Every single town, every single city, really every single road, pick an airport, pick a theater, pick any location where human beings have been. And if it's been there long enough, there's going to be some sort of associative lore, whether it's urban legend or it's actually based upon something. And at least in a lot of these places, they're connected to tragedies, right? Some sort of disaster or event or whatever, which I also catalog. I also catalog mounds, and I also catalog anomalous, gravity roads and optical illusion places, all this sort of stuff. I don't know if there's necessarily like a lattice. I haven't seen any alignments along a lattice other than just along population densities. I've taken my maps of haunted, cryptid UFO locations and just laid it over like population maps, and you pretty much have to have people where you're making these claims, right? And some places go above, just percentages. If you go just above percentages of probability, especially in rural areas, that's where it's interesting. When you go to places like New Orleans, where just in a small block area, you'll have 80 haunted locations. Is that anomalous located with? Are the anomalies located with the geography, or is New Orleans more of a cultural thing? because it's a tradition within New Orleans that every house is going to have a haunted house story, right? And it's just built up as part of the culture. Then the investigation becomes you got to look at those 80 places and to see which ones are actually legit, right? Which ones are exhibiting anomalies, So that's, I don't know. I don't know about ley line patterns or anything. I do know that there are hot spots. I do know that there are anomalous locations. I do know that there are places for whatever reason, geological or a portal or something metaphysical, tied to the geology or geography there. I think there are places like that.
So I think it's I honestly haven't researched that question enough to answer that for Damien. From that standpoint, I've never really, from the ley line standpoint, Damien always gives me new ways to look at something. But as of right now, I haven't researched it enough. I've been investigating for 35 years. Actively. I mean, I investigated as a kid, but right. As you know, from being from Cape and me being from Paducah, it ain't like I got a whole lot of support in my paranormal research escalades and my gift. I got told a lot that, I was worshiping the devil and I was a tool of the devil. And so, but I mean, I did do some, like when I was 13 and 14 in that age area. So like 8th grade, freshman year of school, me and my best friend, who's no longer with us, Tracy, we decided that we were going to figure out how to study paranormal, because we were both into it. So at 13 years old, I read every book that the Warrens ever wrote.
How old are you?
You gonna make me say that on TV?
Well,
I'm 51.
I'm 56, so we're about the same generation. So you and I probably experienced a lot of the same stuff growing up. You probably saw the Amityville Horror, all that hype when that came out on TV, and that got a lot of people interested in ghosts and haunted place. Was it true or not? That's
debatable.
That's the Warrens. But that's the thing. You have to go through the cultural stuff and try to figure out what's really going on there.
Right? Yeah, like you just said, it's different. We know it's definitely a cultural thing. As far as if it's actually active, and I tend to use the word active because the word haunted has such a negative stereo to it. So I say places are active is usually, but whether Amityville is actually an active location or not, I can't say. I've never actually investigated it. So until I actually investigate it, I can't say one thing or that. One thing I did. One thing I do go by though. I never dismiss somebody else's claim. If that's their experience, I can't take that away from them. They obviously experienced something. So.
Well, I mean, and I would have more questions, and a
lot more.
The goal is that I would be curious, and Amityville is like one of those places that I would love to go to. I mean, I spent a summer up there, but I never got to go by the house. But something I think there was certainly a tragic murder. And the Warren photograph they took, I don't think that was hoaxed. Whatever you say about the book or how that was exaggerated or whatever, I don't think the Warrens hoaxed that photograph. I think that was a legitimately interesting photograph, with the kid peeking around the corner. And there was, a tragic murder, and one of the victims looked very similar to that. So whatever you think about books and movies and sequels and all the exploitation stuff that Hollywood does with a lot of these things, I think down in there, there are some.
There was something legit. Yeah. So okay, sadly, for some reason, a lot of the newer generation, which is obviously not me and you, Michael, because we're not new generation, we're OGs. But some of the newer generation, the younger generation, and not all of it, but there's a certain loud minority that they've turned against the Warrens for some reason. And the thing about the Warrens, they were the first pair of celebrities. That's my term, pair of celebrity. Mm-hmm. They were really the first pair of celebrities. And do I think everything I've seen about Amityville and Annabelle and The Conjuring, do I think all that's real? No, I'm not an idiot. I'm a very experienced investigator. Mm-hmm. But do I think that deep down there's some truth in there? I do. I don't think the Warrens would have investigated it if there wasn't. So the bottom line is, I'll go ahead and ask this question. This is a question I usually ask later on, but you kind of touched based on it a little bit in your introduction, and we've kind of touched based on it a little bit now too. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask it. So like I mentioned earlier, parapop culture is like my word. A parapop culture is like the TV, the YouTube videos, everything. How, in your opinion, what do you think the benefits and the negativity? What is the parapop culture done to make the field better, and what have they done to make the field worse?
Well, yeah. Well, it's it's sort of it's a hard thing to consider because there's different levels. You got your conferences and you have your small communities and friends, and people attend their conferences and they interact with their social groups, and they have fun, and it's their vacations for a lot of these subcultures. In UFOs, in cryptids, in ghost hunting, you know what I'm talking about. It's conference season, and it's sort of the livelihood and the blood of these communities. And within that, you have varying degrees of a celebrity culture, and various degrees of people that are trying to put forth legitimate research, or trying to cottage industry, fund their ventures. You got a lot of ghost groups and UFO groups that are trying to fund their groups and their projects, which I think is great. GoFundMe type stuff and Kickstarter type stuff, where you're directly interacting with people and you're seeing what the documentary or the investigation or a camera array or whatever, what it's actually going to go for. And then above that, within all of these different paranormal genres, there are varying degrees of celebrity that go up to millionaires and television stars and people that work for networks and have agents, and they're on these not just local conferences, but they're on these tours. It's almost like a kind of a vaudeville sort of thing. People have agents and all that, and a lot of them are promoting stuff. They're promoting their groups, and at the higher levels, when you go to places like Palm Springs and some of these places where it's pretty pricey, there's a corporate element to it, because ghosts and Bigfoot and UFOs are popular within entertainment media. In UFOs, it's called UFOtainment, and you have a whole celebrity culture. Ancient Aliens is like done a road show tour for the past couple of years, where they visited like 20 cities, and the tickets are like $50, and they've sold out stadiums, and have made millions. And unfortunately, not really much of that's going to go back towards UFO science or research or anything. You have a celebrity culture, and when it gets up to that, you have to worry about the credibility of the people, whether or not they're trying to increase sensationalism in order to maintain their celebrity, and if they are actually manipulating things or even doctoring things or trying to alter things, not for the perspective of encouraging truth or investigation or revealing information to the communities, but to manipulate them, right? Money. And there are millionaires. There are millionaire UFO researchers, celebrities. There are millionaire ghost hunter researchers. There are millionaire Bigfoot hunter researchers. Fact. They became millionaires from celebrity, and a lot of it is sensationalism, and some of it's good in that. That's what drew me when I was a kid, was the cheesy documentaries and TV shows and all that, the narratives, the stories, the encounters that drew me in, and it got me interested, but I think you have to worry in the reality TV age, the TikTok age, and all that. We're living in an AI world now, and reality is blurred. And even if and I do this a lot, some people think I'm a skeptic when I tell them that, well, that's actually an LED kite right there. That's not a UFO. I'm Mr. Buzzkill, you don't believe in UFOs. And it's like, okay, 3-year noob. I've been around for 50 years. I'm just telling you, it looks like
I get that a lot, especially, with the YouTube culture now.
Yeah.
Most of them want to yell everything's a demon. And, I'm the first one to say it's not a demon. They're like, oh, you don't believe in demons. I'm like, I am a trained demonologist. I was trained under Bishop James Long. Yeah. I was like, yeah, so same thing. So, yeah. I mean, I think you're right on the money. I have nothing against nobody. To me, I'm in like Damien just said, our friend, he has too much self-respect to fake anything. No money can buy that. That's the way I am. And I know that's the way you are, Michael. Even though this is the first time we've actually talked face to face, we've been talking for a while.
You don't need to fake anything. You don't need to fake anything. Here's to all the people that want to do media in the phenomena realm, whatever it is. You don't need to fake anything. You don't need to sensationalize anything. In fact, the truer you are to the account, the more intriguing it's gonna be. You don't need to make that Bigfoot scary. Make it accurate, exactly. Make that UFO accurate. You don't need to put laser beams and try to go to the location and try to get an idea what it was actually like, and try to do reality. You don't need to do that,
Right. And there's always going to be people that's going to do that. But the point that was made to me last season, I had my friend Sarah on the show, and Sarah said, the people that are going to tune in to the people who sensationalize and fake stuff, they're not the same people who's going to tune in to us. The people that's going to tune in to me or you, they're tuning in to see the truth and what it's really like. So she's like, whether we like it or not, there's a place in the field for them. And that, I guess that's true. When I have a problem with them, Michael, when I have a problem with these people like that, is when they start making it more difficult for the real investigators. For example, this one group that's running around, they're mostly into ghosts. They're trying to branch out now, so be worried about that. They're trying to branch out into the Skinwalker Ranch sensation. But they walk around, and because they're young and they're good looking, and so they have like that following, and and they've even made it into the movie theaters, and they bought a school now that may or may not be haunted, but they've tripled the ticket price to go investigate it. So that's one problem I got with them. The first problem I ever had with them, they're one of these ones that started out on YouTube, and they came into the field just to be a celebrity. Now, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't mind having their money. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying let's do it the right way. So this is what they did to me personally. So last year, my team went and investigated the Harriman Hospital in Tennessee, one of the most haunted hospitals in the United States. They just opened it back up last year. So we get there, And of course, we have to sign like a 3-page waiver now and whatever. But we get to the third page, and the third page says that I can't release my video evidence until it's pre-approved by the location.
Right.
And the location tells me straight up to my face. They tell me this is because of. I'm not going to say the names because they may sue me, but I don't care. It's because of Sam and Kobe. That Sam and Kobe came to the location and they went live and they started saying everything was a demon. So now I can't release my evidence until it's approved. So that's when I have a problem. So I said that Sam and Kobe are nothing but the boy band of the paranormal field, and our good friend Damien here corrected me. He said they're not even the boy band; they're the Spice Girls of the paranormal field. But I still wish them success. I just wish they would focus on the real, instead of sensationalizing.
Well, here's the thing, and it's an issue. When does like evidence become like proprietary? Like who owns a location or a spot? And yeah, that for me, that's a big turnoff because as a researcher, the minute I find something, I share it with people, and
that's the way it should be.
I'm like, here, share this around or whatever. Just make sure my name's on it there somewhere, and I want other people's opinions, and I want their viewpoints, and that's there's too much competition, and a lot of it's business and camps, and you got the personality, egos, and all that sort of stuff. And
exactly, and it is competition. It should be. There should be a community, and it should be about cooperating. I'm asked all the time. What's the difference between the paranormal field now and 35 years ago when I got into it? And the main thing is. And I tell people, just like I'm going to state right here, I give the same answer every time. You go back and watch 2 seasons of my podcast, and it's the same answer. So when I first got into it, the paranormal field was all about finding that wow evidence, that you can't, and about working together to better the field and cooperating with each other. And now, like you said, now people in our age group, Michael, that's been doing this for a while. Not ours, obviously. I'm not talking about ours, but there's some of them out there that think that they have a spot up here, and these young people are knocking them down. And it should be about competition. I love helping a young investigator. And so yeah. So enough talk about the negative. Let's get to Damien's second question, and then I want to get to my personal UFO experience. But let's get to Damien's second question first. So Damien's second question was, do you find a higher percentage of UFO witnesses have either, I'm going to mispronounce this, empathetic? Do you think they either have psychic abilities, or do they have more of the paranormal connection after UFO experience?
That's an interesting question. It's actually a couple of different questions sort of embedded in there. Has there been a psychic connection to UFO cases over the past 80 or so years, or even before that, where people have had claims of the anomalous or interactions with beings from the sky or elsewhere? There have been claims of psychic connections, even going back to like the 50s, the contactee movement or whatever. All of those were based upon some sort of not just in-person communication with Venusians or whatever, but also the psychic sort of stuff that came out. It's connected in many ways to the science fiction and pop culture of the time period. That's where we were getting a lot of, those the science fiction magazines, the Buck Rogers, post-Buck Rogers type stuff going into the 30s, 40s, influencing that culture, and the flying saucer age coming about. within the 40s. And there's always been a pathway between this, with this subject, a transient path, actually, or a parallel path between these subjects, because they've been intertwined with esoteric thought. Even, like esoteric philosophy, like Thelemic type stuff, going back to the turn of the century. So the idea that there are non-intelligence, that there are intelligences from the stars, it's all H.P. Lovecraft took all that in the 20s and the 30s as well. Are there psychic connections? There have been surveys more than detailed studies. I believe, like this, different groups, like the Center for UFO Studies, I think, may have done one, and certainly Bigelow and his group have tried to make to see if there's connections either during the event or post event, because they're, and you have to sort of like consider these, and are they part of the Hynek scale of encounters? Is this a close encounter of the third kind? What are all the details that connect that? And then you look into to see if there is a pre-psychic component, a psychic component during, and a post-psychic. Because some people have claimed, even if it's not a close encounter of the third kind, even within like the second kind, or a first kind, just being within proximity, that may have affected some sort of mechanism within the brain. There are scientists now that speculate, and you can look at like the work of like Kit Green, and he was like connected to Bigelow as well as Gary Nolan with the Soul Foundation in Stanford. He has explored the ideas of these phenomena being in proximity can actually alter the brain chemistry. It can affect the development of a region called the caudate putamen. I'm not a brain scientist. It sounds like to me, as a researcher, it sounds like Lovecraft quite a bit. The From Beyond thing, where the certain energies can extrapolate, the glands in the brain, and you can see things or whatever. That may be true or not, or what. Right now it's speculation. Right now it's bias, sort of a view within a narrative, which is part of all these other narratives. It'd be interesting to see if there's any sort of science and how you would determine that. A lot of this stuff is sort of wrapped up by Bigelow and these government people that have looked into these, sort of fringe thing, these psychic UFO connections. But to answer the question, it's maybe open to interpretation. Who knows? And again, it's case by case. You have to look at everything case by case, because this person over here saying that they're psychically communicating may just be nuts, or this person over here, maybe they're actually, something's going on. Maybe there's a physical, natural sort of thing. There's never one singular explanation for any anomalous claim. I don't care what it is, or I don't care what it is. If it's Loch Ness Monster, doesn't mean your Loch Ness Monster is the same one that somebody saw in 1939. It doesn't, all of these mysteries are separate mysteries. That's what fascinates me. There's thousands of mysteries and thousands of bits of evidence and thousands of people to look at and to consider their credibility, because it's what we do. We judge, we put our own viewpoints into things, and we try to measure things, and we try to be honest, and we change our minds later on, when we view things differently, when we understand the world and human nature and evidence, what it actually is and what it's going to be not just to prove to ourselves. I think a lot, we need to sort of change that. We're not trying to prove anything to ourselves. You're trying to prove it to other people. And if you want to be exploitative about it, people are just going to be like, I don't want to be in your cult, man. You're trying to manipulate me too much. The best way to get people interested is provide actual interesting evidence. And that's what we need to get. We need to get away from TikTok numbers and all that sort of stuff. That's good. And there are perks to that. I think a lot of people in these communities do it just because they get free travel. They'll do a TV show because they get to go to Roswell on somebody else's dime, or get to go to a haunted location and somebody else is paying for it. That's interesting. I still consume all this stuff, all the stuff. I watch Ancient Aliens. I watch all these things, because I'm a researcher and I love all this. But mostly I love when they go to the places and really get into the mysteries and go beyond the sensation, because you really don't need to sensationalize these. When somebody says they saw a Bigfoot 5 feet away from them, you don't need to sensationalize that anymore.
Exactly.
You just need to tell them to be honest.
The thing is, just like you said, you do have the ones that just do it for the travel. And the thing that's interesting is, this is more to do with the last question than Damien's, but this is kind of my segue, because we're getting ready to move on. But so this is an expensive hobby. It's not a hobby; it's my passion, but it's expensive. We talked about, we do have a few celebrity, we do have a few millionaires in the field. I probably lost that much. I probably spent that much money in my lifetime. I don't consider myself anybody. Nobody. I get lectured about it all the time. To me, I'm a nobody. And this is an example of how much I consider myself a nobody. So as we discussed earlier, I am going to be part of the Smoky Mountain Terror next week. I was thrilled just to get an invite. You know what I'm saying? Because it's a big honor. It's a big deal. So
where's that at?
It's in Kingsport, Tennessee.
Oh, okay.
So outside of Gatlinburg. So I was excited just to be invited, because it's a big deal. I mean, it's a big honor. Mm-hmm. Well, I was talking to one of my probably my best friend in the paranormal field, who is a para celebrity. I mean, he's had the TV shows, everything, So so I was talking to him, and he messaged me. Well, actually, I hadn't even talked to him yet. He saw my post on my Facebook page. That's my Facebook page. I'm going to post whatever I want. Anyway, he saw my post on my Facebook page. He messages me. He's like, "How'd you pull that off?" He's like, "We tried to get on there, and they told us we were too small. They told us we wasn't big enough to come down there." And I was like, well, if you're not big enough, I'm definitely not big enough to be there. So I actually thought about canceling my trip, but that's just the thing. It is. I actually got lectured by my guest 3 episodes ago, because they had me as a guest on their show, and I was like, I'll come on there. I was like, but it's probably not going to be a very good episode. And he's like, you need to stop thinking about it. He's like, you might not realize this, but he's like, your team was the first team that I followed. He's like, your podcast was the first one I watched. He's like, whether you realize it or not, you're a really respected person in the field. So anyway, I say all that to say that I'm not worried about that. I don't want to be a celebrity. I'm a researcher. That's what I am.
Right.
But anyway, we've had opportunities to be on TV.
Yeah.
And we've been on a few episodes. Yeah. We've been on a few episodes. Like we investigated this place in Cadiz, Kentucky, and the other team they were filming while we were there. We were just a team that went with them, and so we were on that episode because we were there with them. But anyway, so last year I got invited to actually do silver episodes of a TV show, um, and I said no forever because I don't want to be tied into the negative view of that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then I finally broke down and agreed to do it for the purpose, like we've been discussing. I want everybody to see what it's really like. I want everybody to see what it's really like to look for evidence.
Right.
So we're going to do it.
I mean, I've done media also. I haven't taken any money for it, but when I've worked with people, and I've worked with Seth and Seth Breedlove at Small Town Monsters. I was in a couple episodes of On the Trail of UFOs, his series. But it was just more like a conversation, and we were at an event together, and it was a conversation, and I'll do something if I can say what I want to say, and
exactly.
I've been asked by like ancient like shows and the corporate ones, and I'm like, no. My wife's like,
if you do that, it's where the
yes.
producer
My wife's like, you should say yes, because there's money and all that. But no, I'm not a performer. I am a researcher, and I am not going to read a script and say something that I don't want to say. If you want me to be involved in a project, then it's going to be cooperative. Otherwise, I'm not your tap dancer. Thank you. If I want to create my own content, I will, and I do. And if I want to work with people, I will or I won't. And when we did Grand Tower recently with Joe Torre, I co-wrote that and narrated it, and it's based on my research and all that sort of stuff. And it was about the project. It's about telling the story. It's about sharing these anomalies and these viewpoints with people. And you can view it on Tubi for free right now. We're not going on tour to sell it, to conferences or whatever. It's just sharing research, and that's okay to do. And I encourage people to do that. And you don't have to be a TV star. You don't have to sell out or perform or whatever. The travel and all that is a lure, and money is a lure, and the celebrity is a lure. And there may be good circumstances where it's a good thing. If you're going somewhere and you can say what you want to say, and you can contribute, participate, you can see a unique location, and you're being honest and sharing, and everything that I just said is usually not what people say when they come out after dealing with like networks and companies, Prometheus, and whatever it is, ghost hunting or whatever. But there's performance in a lot of this. I think with ghost hunting and with UFOs and cryptids or whatever, if you're just out for 1 or 2 days, it's very limited. You're looking for that little punch. You're looking for that 1 or 2 little bit, just second or two of a EVP or something on a infrared or FLIR or something. You're looking for those anomalies to see if there's something that you can figure out and explain away or log as something that's truly interesting. The TV shows have sort of limited us to that, but also these locations limit us, because a lot of these are, haunted hotels, they got businesses to run or whatever. Ideally, what you want is long-term scientific investigation with the cameras going on for years. Whether it's UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, whatever, that's legitimate science. And then you write papers, and then you publish papers. Nobody's publishing, well, not nobody. There are people in ghosts, UFOs, and cryptids that publish the occasional paper. But if you're trying to change people's views, if you're trying to change the paradigm, the narrative of how reality works, if you're trying to convince other people you're going to need evidence that convinces them, not you.
Right.
And I'm a believer and I'm strict and get called a skeptic. Imagine the skeptics, for them, you're going to need to bring in a dead Bigfoot or a ghost in a jar or a crashed flying saucer with a dead alien for them to believe. And those would be great to have too, that would, and
Okay.
it wouldn't solve every case. Even if you had an alien, it doesn't mean that McMinnville happened,
Exactly.
That's another thing, any evidence that you have for this doesn't necessarily legitimize something else. It just adds more questions.
Okay, so I'm going to show my UFO experience real fast because we're getting ready to cut or feed to Get Haunted. We will continue on the other two links, but so anybody that's watching on Get Haunted, you need to join us on the YouTube so you continue watching. But anyway, so here's a story behind my UFO video. So I was at my in-laws. This was 10 years ago. So this was 2015 in Water Valley, Kentucky, which is really a really rural community, right? So we're over there at my father-in-law's, he's a skeptic of ghosts. But when it comes to UFOs, he's more open-minded. He's a big fan of the ancient alien shows and stuff. So anyway, so we're having a cookout. I had already cooked hot dogs, hamburgers. We'd already ate, and we were just we were all inside the house relaxing, except for my father-in-law, who like a lot of older men, was out on his porch, sitting in a chair, and he comes and gets me, and he's like, I think we have a UFO. He'd been out there for 15 minutes watching this thing, so he came and got me, and this is what we got. This is what I got. Oh, the wrong one. This is what we got. There we go. Right there. And I watched it for I filmed it for like 5 minutes, but I watched it for 20 minutes, and that's all it did. And we in this area we get a lot of military flyovers from Fort Campbell, but I'm a veteran, so I've seen that on I've experienced it on base and this area all my life. And this is obviously not military, but
it is an unidentified flying object. UFOs are real. Whenever somebody is like, are UFOs real? It's like, yeah, absolutely, UFOs are real. Yeah, people see unidentified flying objects. That in that picture is an object that is flying and it's unidentified. So on that, it is a UFO. Within like the classification system, it's a far distant object. It's what you would call a nocturnal light. Some people call them orbs now, but I think orbs it's a biasing term, and it means a lot of different things. To different people, especially like with ghosts and other paranormal realms or whatever. But we would look at that, and we would then ask a lot of information. I would want to know where you're standing. I want to know what direction, time, date, elevation, and then all your camera and what you're filming it with, and who are the other people there. And with that information, you can then use different research investigative tools to determine if it's especially now as we enter the drone age, and the government is adopting what is called joint all domain command and control, which basically is sort of like a surveillance sky net, so to speak, because within the next 20 years we're going to have a lot of surveillance drones, delivery drones especially. It's going to be like Star Wars Coruscant. There's going to be like Amazon lanes delivering things, sky robots and all this sort of stuff, which leads to potentiality, especially after looking at like with the warfare in Ukraine, which has been a drone war. That's a consideration, sky security and looking at all these things. The government is locking a lot of this down, and I think people are setting up a lot of firms to take reports of things in the skies so that they can put this information within these larger systems. I think if uh, UFOs, state UFOs, usually because, well, not usually. I mean, a UFO is a UFO because you don't have all the information. If you had all the information, it wouldn't be a UFO anymore. So we try to get right. So you try to get as much information as you can in order to not just identify it, but at least get enough information to where you can consider your possibility.
In this day and age, my first thought was, after dismissing the military thing, my next thought was drone, but that's too high up in the air for a drone.
Well, there's a lot of different kinds of drones now. There's also blimps, which are drone blimps. There's also high atmospheric research drones that actually have information within that, and there's different companies that are trying to compete with Starlink, which probably most people misidentify now as UFOs more than anything. They think it's a fleet of UFOs when it's just orbiting satellites or whatever. But there are a lot of different high altitude blimps. So I think if anybody's seeing something, definitely you want to record it and get all your GPS and all that. But you also need to get some of those tools out there to that will show you what's flying in the air. There are free apps that will give you the number of an airplane flying over your head, and more that you're starting to see as this stuff gets integrated. You'll see. I'm already seeing it on a lot of the apps that I use. Drones and helicopters and government research stuff, and you can track a lot of these things. And at least if you're going to be somebody that is, and this is to UFO researchers out there, if you're going to be somebody that is talking about what's in the sky with any sort of authority, you have to know what's in the sky. You have to study the weather. You have to study astronomy. You have to study aviation, and you have to study, what's going on. People see so many rocket tests now, and rocket plumes are every week, is being misattributed as being a UFO. What you saw, I don't know. I don't have enough information. It could be at high altitude blimp, some sort of research blimp or whatever. And I'm not insulting you. I'm not saying you didn't see whatever.
No.
Because we know blimps.
I completely agree.
We don't necessarily know that interplanetary probes, with robotic.
And like you said,
that's the extreme.
I did
things first.
Yeah, I just missed. I just missed drone based on like your basic. Like I got a really good drone that I use in my investigations. But especially
the altitude top too high.
There, yeah, but with Fort Campbell being there, they would have the high speed surveillance ones. So there's no telling what it was. It is, but technically it is a UFO because it is an unidentified flying object.
It is, and if you see it again, and if then that's when it becomes interesting because
right.
Then it's there again, or if other people see something similar, or Jalen Hynek had always said that nocturnal lights are the least interesting, and it's true, but it also depends on what they're doing. If they're zipping around, if they're doing some sort of interesting behavior, or if they're just out of place where it doesn't make any sense. They don't have to be like Close Encounters where everything's sparkling and shooting laser stuff out.
Right.
Most of the time, people see what you see.
Right.
Is a nice.
And like you said, we grew up in the same area, so we grew up with Close Encounters, Space Odyssey, even ET. It was all about like so. Yeah, so you said something interesting, something earlier that interests me. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit. You mentioned orbs, whether orbs was maybe whether they were. So orbs, as you know, is kind of a controversial thing in the paranormal field anyway, because you have people who are like, oh, orbs are good evidence. Then you got people who are like, no, orbs are just a bug on the lens or just dust. So so my opinion on orbs is both sides are right. I mean, sometimes you get orb, and sometimes it is just a bug on the lens or just dust. But sometimes it is actually something. And and that's what I tell people. I'm an experienced investigator. I know the difference between a piece of dust and an actual orb. So yeah. So what do you agree with that, or what's your take on an orb?
Well, I mean, orb. The term orb is found in UFOs, in the UFO research community as well as ghost community, and basically, I guess how it's described is some sort of like luminous ball, right? It could be from like a marble-sized thing to even a basketball-sized thing. And there's a lot of places that anomalous locations, haunted locations, places like Skinwalker Ranch, places like Marfa, Texas, places that have claimed activity or interaction with luminous spheres or balls of varying sizes. Usually within that, when you get a something that's like the size of a Volkswagen, that's
Right.
not really, it becomes more of a vehicle or an object, I think, in the minds of people than an orb. Within ghost community, it's often viewed as possibly some sort of manifestation of a ghost, or some sort of consciousness from some sort of reality or another time or whatever, or something that is imprinted from the environment. In the UFO world, usually they tend to be a little larger. They're often viewed as like in the daytime as being like metal spheres that accompany like flying saucers, and there's a whole sort of thing within that. But there's also the connectivity between within UFO world and ghost world of another invisible realm, and they both could be sort of the same thing, moving over at different times, and that's how they manifest. It's interesting. I have been to places. I have taken pictures of orbs. Sometimes, especially a lot of amateur researchers will be in places like basements and it's dusty, and they'll take a flash photograph, and the dust will be like a circular camera lensing artifact that's reflecting back, and it's an optical thing. It's dust, or an insect. There's things that could be. It depends on the type of camera you have and how good you are. There are a lot of amateur people, researchers that maybe they're using lower grade equipment. They're not expert photographers or whatever, but whatever. People are experiencing them. They see them. Every case is open to interpretation. Every piece of evidence, video is open to interpretation. Some things are interesting. Some things are just like, that's just a dusty room and a bad camera.
Exactly.
Sorry. I mean,
just photograph.
I'm not seeing anything anomalous that I wouldn't see in my basement, going through a box. But sometimes you get things that seem to be intelligent, or it's at a location. I took an orb picture at a haunted location, and I didn't see it in real life, but I photographed what was. This is in Alton, Illinois. I think it was at the Centenary Church. But there was a partition where I guess a priest had hung himself from. And I was alone there in that room, and I, put my camera up there and took a picture. And there was this weird little light that was just exactly in the spot where this event took place. It wasn't there at any other sort of thing. It's a photographic anomaly. It will never be evidence of necessarily anything. It's interesting
Exactly.
in that it coincides. I think anybody who is a paranormal investigator will recognize the fact that it's not the big things, it's the little things. And that the most common paranormal event, if you put yourself in these locations and if you're in researching these things, are synchronicities. It's little, just coincidental things that make the question even, like, why, where this guy hung himself? Why is this going on? Why am I in the Waverly Hills morgue and we're doing an Estes session? And why is so much information coming through that is like intriguing? Why is a FLIR artifact on a camera and we're looking into a shower? Why is there nobody in the shower, but there's a stick figure in there taking a shower? So it's the little things that they're intriguing. It's the photographic anomalies. I've taken pictures of orbs, ghosts, UFOs, full body apparitions, from a lot of different places. And it's a cumulative thing, and it's open to interpretation as to, whether it's good as evidence or not, but it's intriguing.
My best orb story, and like you said, been doing this a long time. Most of the time, I just dismiss orbs. I mean, I look at it, and then I'm like, especially ones that are sent to me. I love when somebody sends something to me. They're like, "Look, I captured something." I'm like, "Dust." But anyway, we were investigating this location in Tennessee. We were one of the first teams to ever get investigated. We actually got to spend the whole night in it. We actually got to sleep in the beds and everything. It was a house that was built in 1817. The property was given to the guy because 1827. But the property was given to the guy because he served as a major in the Revolutionary War, in the War of 1812. So they gave people property in Tennessee and Kentucky or whatever. So he ended up being a doctor, and he was highly respected. Everybody in the community loved him. He also made wine, and everybody loved him. Of course, he had slaves. Everybody had slaves back then, but the slaves loved him. Everybody loved him. Well, he died, and his son got the house, and his son was not as well liked, to put it nicely, and he treated the slaves and everybody very badly, where the slaves ended up killing them, murdering them on the front porch. So anyway, the name of the place is the Dr. Wharton House. So we go there and investigate, and we were just getting started. We had done a session in the basement and not got much, but we were in the what would have been the fancy dining room, and we were just my team's a large team. I have 15 members on my team, so obviously I have to have help. So I have two team leads, and one of my team leads, she was just taking pictures, like you do, just to get a base and everything, and so she takes 5 pictures in a row, same location, same spot. There was nothing. Then there was an orb, and then the orb got bigger, and then the orb got bigger. Then the orb disappeared. And so I couldn't dismiss that because I was there when she was taking it, so I know there was nothing there, and we didn't realize this until we got got home and reviewed the evidence.
Hmm.
But so that orb I couldn't dismiss. And then the most interesting, and I don't even know if I really consider it an orb. It kind of falls into the orb group, but it kind of doesn't. So, animal ghost. That's an interesting subject on its own.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been a big believer in animal ghosts, animal spirits, personally.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because I've never seen it. Now,
right.
But being in this field, I couldn't exactly dismiss it either. Long story short, we was in Metropolis, Illinois, investigating the Riverview Mansion there.
Yeah, I've been there.
So we were investigating it. That was both a good and a bad experience. The bad experience is because the old lady that owned it was following us, and we think she was faking some stuff. So that's never good. But we still got some really good evidence. One thing I captured, since you've been there, you probably know the story about her parakeet that was like 100 years old when it died. So I actually captured, and I still got it. I'll send it to you later so you can see it. I actually captured a orb that looked like a parakeet in flight, except for you could see through it. So it's definitely not alive. You know what I'm saying?
They have the old Victrola records there, right? At that place,
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's and that happens too. There are places, that are touristy and they're business oriented, and they take advantage of their history and their location. And I think that's good in some respects, but if you're faking, that's bad. People are going to go there regardless. You don't need to fake anything.
Right.
They're still going to go there for history. They're still going to go there because that's what we do. We go to these places. And what you were saying about orbs, I don't know. And it does depend on the case. And some of them are haunted, more spiritual or haunted, ghost oriented. And then, you do have the UFO oriented ones. I think that there is a natural phenomena, at least within, the atmospheric anomaly aspect. I think that there is a geologic atmospheric phenomena in some places that create buoyant plasmas. And it's tied to the tectonics, and it's tied to the water, and it's tied to the stresses and the gases. And I think it's in some places, Hesselin in Norway, where they had the long-term study that has been going on since before the 80s, and it's still going on. They believe that the geology is kind of like a battery, and in some of these places there are sparks, and it's a very rare phenomena, and it's believed by some people that it may even create electromagnetic effects that can affect perception. Okay, it's the Earth lights theory, and the idea that it can affect perception. That's from Michael Persinger. The idea that high electromagnetic fields can alter how we see things, and I think that's a possibility. More than a possibility, I think that's demonstrable in some places, and I think some haunted places may be like that. They may not be occupied by some sort of metaphysical being consciousness from another realm or reality or dimension. It may just have a physical electromagnetic component that is messing with your brain. I think
exactly
that is true. I think the military has probably looked at these sort of microwave and electromagnetic effects that certainly do affect the mind. Probably have maybe developed hypnagogic weapons, over the decades. And there are some places that maybe that's why that place is haunted, because there's uranium or limestone or something under there going on that is messing with your head. I think that's in some places. I think UFOs are Earth lights.
We know limestone naturally absorbs energy, ghosts or energy. So I mean, that would be easy. That would be easy next step.
Yeah.
So
I map locations. So there are some places where there's a Central Florida. I was able to find. I chart ghost lights. And in Central Florida, I was able to find 3 ghost lights that form like a pyramid sort of shape in these different towns in the Everglades. This town's got a ghost light. This town's got a ghost light, and this town's got a ghost light. What's in the direct center? A phosphate mine. What does that mean? I don't know. It's interesting that there's a ghost light here, there's a ghost light here, and there's a ghost light here, all of these towns, and right in the center is basically, what powers our batteries, right? And it's underwater, right? And part of it because it's swamp and it's the Everglades or whatever, and they're digging it up and they're moving stuff around, and weather changes and the atmosphere gets electrified or whatever. So maybe in some of these places you get these things, right? And it's not ghosts, and it's not aliens, and it's not a government conspiracy connected to Roswell. It's looking at what's going on and saying, oh, this is an interesting aspect to this mystery that may be an explanation. That's not a debunking, it's just there's something there, right?
Right. Yeah, I investigate everything, Michael. I try to debunk everything, and if I can't debunk it, then it's evidence. Or even if and just like you said, that's not necessarily mocking it. That just, that may be part of the chorus. It may be So
it's your evidence. You're helping yourself. You don't want to look like an idiot if it's like, oh, there's an ambulance that drove by exactly at that time, and you got the reflection, dude. You look like an idiot. That's your reputation.
Exactly.
So you want to do your due diligence. You don't want to put evidence out there just to put evidence out there. You want to look through it and say, I'm not going to release this because I don't have enough information. Or you're going to say, this is interesting. I've looked at everything. I've tried to figure it out. It doesn't make any sense. We don't get that enough, I think, within all this.
That's why it should be. Yeah.
There's like, oh, man, look at that UFO video. Isn't that great? And it's like, dude, it's balloons. It's
exactly. It's a blip.
Balloons. There's a number 1. There's a number 2. It's not an alien invasion, or game camera. That's probably a bear. Sorry, you got something, but there's nothing there in that particular piece of evidence that somebody can't just say it doesn't look like something we don't know. It could possibly be a bear, and we know this exists. So we it's all supposition, and it's all sort of measure, figuring it out.
Yeah. So for example, we were investigating Octagon Hall in Franklin, Kentucky, and I was down. We were down in the basement, and we were actually doing an EVP session in the library, in the family library down there. Well, something told me to look up.
Octagon Hall. Right?
Yep.
Okay, that's right. I'm trying to. Yeah. My brain's trying to remember because you said Franklin. That's also where Thomas Mantell, his airplane crashed.
Yep.
1948, right there. So my brain shut down. Then I was like, okay, that's right. There's an Octagon building right next near there.
Yep. Same place. And there's actually that whole area, that whole town, basically, it has the plane crash. It has Octagon Hall. It also has the old stone jail.
Right.
So anyway, so we're down in the basement doing an EVP session. Something tells me to look up, whether it's my senses, whether it's my gift, whatever you want to say. Something tells me to look up. So I look up, and as I look up, I see an apparition pacing in front of the steps. A lot of times when you get apparition, they just stand there. This one was pacing. And so I immediately stand up and start turning on lights and everything I can to debunk this. I go out and see if there was traffic driving by. Of course, it's in the middle of nowhere. So this is like 2:00 in the morning. There ain't no traffic, but
Yeah.
I'm still trying to debunk it. So I can't debunk it. So so I still have that piece of evidence. If you go on my team's YouTube channel, Ken 10 Paranormal. If you go on YouTube, it's actually in our Octagon Hall video. Yeah, because I couldn't debunk it, and I actually shared it with a couple of other teams I know that I trust. They've actually been to Octagon Hall, several times. They give their take on it, and they're like, "Can't debunk it." And I was like, "If you can't debunk it, it means it's something." So,
yeah, I was at. I go down to Eureka Springs, Arkansas every once in a while to they have a UFO conference, one of the oldest ones down there. So I make it down there every other year, and the Crescent Hotel is down there, which is considered one of the it's probably in the top 10 lists of haunted hotels. And yeah, I go
I would say
there.
top 5.
Yeah, it's up there. It's one of those places where it's like, there's a lot of people that go to these conferences and everything. It's like, I'm more interested in, what's around me. I've left conferences to go see where the Fuckville Metal Man was. I've left conferences to go, see where, a certain Bigfoot was nearby.
You
want the opportunity.
You need to start coming to my conference. Because I need a UFO. I need a UFO guy. I do a conference every year in Mayfield.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I make it down. I think I'm not going to be speaking, but I'll be down in Kelly for the Hopkins, the Goblin Con that's coming up in the fall.
Yep.
I used to go to the Kelly thing a bunch over the years. So the Kelly the Goblin Encounter from the 50s.
That's an interesting one.
It's one of the big historical cases, and it's one of those things where it's the community celebrating like their history, and everything from that goes to like the fire department. So it's like nobody's like making money, or they're not bringing celebrities or whatever. They're bringing like
that's kind of like mine. This is the 4th year of mine, and so Mayfield, Kentucky. That's where I am now. Mayfield and Graves County has kind of adopted Halloween as their thing. So every weekend in October they have a special event. So obviously, being me, I started planning a Paracon. I don't really like that term, but I started planning a Paracon 4 years ago. This is the 4th year for it. This year, I decided to get rid of the Paracon name. We're now a Paranormal Expo, and I
try to. I was just gonna say I visit a lot of different ones, and we sort of mix it up, and I visit different. We go to these things sort of based on what my wife and my family wants to do also. Like Eureka Springs, we go down there, and I go to the UFO stuff, and they go to all the other the zoos and the animal stuff and all that. But I'll probably end up getting that eventually, if not not this year.
This year the date might not work for you, but like I said, I'm already booking for next year. So we always do it. We always do it the last Saturday of September, and we do it on that, so we can kick off the event. And it's also National Ghost Hunting Day.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I love going to this stuff. I love going more, not on the working side of it, because it's just, I don't like sitting behind a table. I like, buying books and seeing places nearby and doing all that.
You're only a 40-minute drive, Michael.
Yeah.
So even if you this year, even if you ain't officially on it, just come down. It's only $10 to get a ticket, and you get a wristband. You can come and go as you want. I got Josh Morris with TEPS Investigations. I got 8 speakers. I got Josh Morris. I got Jimmy Ricker from Outlaw Paranormal. I got Michael Iller from is the Cryptic and Paranormal from Nashville. He's going to be there. We got a whole bunch of people going there, and then we got we got people. We got other teams that are just coming, like you said, just because you realize this, but my viewers might not realize this much. We need the public to come to these events because that's how we pay for it.
Right.
I don't want to go broke putting this thing on. But when it comes to like me and you, and when we go to these events, we go to network, we go to socialize. It's actually a conference for us. So
yeah. It's a fine balance with these. You want the community, the research communities to interact. You want people to communicate and interact with each other, and everybody shares an interest. And people produce things and they create art and all that. And you want to provide people an opportunity for whatever content they create to people to support each other. And a lot of times on this level, okay, and it's way different when you start getting agents and corporations and all that sort of stuff, and you get into these professional circuit sort of stuff. That's where you have a lot of compromises going on. Yeah. But
I did that last year.
It's necessary to fund a lot of what you want to do. It's you want to pay for your event, but maybe you got a trip or a ghost hunt and you just need some gas and hotel money you're trying to get, right?
Instead of me paying it out of my pocket. So
right.
So previously I worried about trying to get the celebrities in here. Like last year I had Aaron G. Thompson, for 28 days hunting. Uh-huh. I had him last year, and then I got to thinking, and it was pointed out to me by friends of mine who do more of these on bigger scales, and they told me nobody really gives a shit about the celebrities anymore. He's like, because it's the same celebrities at every one. They want to go to somebody that's actually so this year. I mean, I still got celebrities. I got Jimmy Ricker from Outlaw Paranormal. He's pretty big, and then Josh Morris. He's got his TV show and stuff, so he's pretty big. But I mean, other than that, I got people like from Memphis and Nashville. So they're still kind of local, and And the interesting thing is like Josh, he actually called me one night at 2:00, one morning at 2:00 in the morning. It was like, I want to come to be part of your show, and I'm like, I'm already booked. I'm like, but I was like, but we can talk. I was like, I need to know what your fee is and all that stuff is, because like you said, we have some celebrities in this field who you have to go through their agents and stuff, and he's like, no, he's like, you don't understand. He's like, I just want to come down. I'm not worried about a fee or anything. So I can turn that down. So the interesting thing is talking about celebrities, and I have nothing against this guy. I consider him a friend. We exchange emails weekly. I got his personal email address, not his business email address, and that's Steve Gonzalez from TAPS, from Ghost Hunters. Mm-hmm. He's actually been on my podcast. Like I said, we talk weekly. I consider him a friend. But I asked him about coming to the event, and he's like, no, you have to go through my agent for that. He's like, you want to know what his appearance fee is?
Probably a couple grand, I would think, at least, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So guess who's never going to come to the event?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard. It's an industry. These are industries, and some of them are cottage industries, and some of them are book publishing, and some of them are network television. So you have all that stuff, and some of them are competing with each other. There's bullshit artists in there. There's con artists and cultists in there.
And there's actors.
There's actors. So you have to wade through that. You can't force people to do stuff. Whenever I'm like critical of somebody, they're like, "Oh, you're gatekeeping." I'm like, I can't keep you from doing anything, dude. You can write whatever you want, make whatever documentary you want, and then I'm going to give you my opinion. Just like you have freedom of speech, I have freedom of speech too. So, we can interact with each other. I think we should try to be cordial. I think there is a class of people out there that are just selling stuff. But I think there's a grassroots of researchers out there that need to up their game. and they need funds, but they need to be more creative. You don't need to sell out. You don't need to be a celebrity. Just do some Kickstarters and, have some small conferences. Like what you're saying, you can have a conference that's workshops, or where you guys have a conference where it's like, how do we improve this? And everybody, there's not a stage. There's everybody's down here. And people would go to that. People go to these things for the communities. People go to these things because they want to see something new and different. A lot of these places now, it has the same people doing the same thing, selling the same TV show. And it's like, especially in the ghost world, it's just, it's like, oh, hey, they're at nighttime and it's infragreen. And it's like, oh my God, it's like, I want to see some different things done. I want to see some experimentation. I want to see people writing papers, scientific papers that you're going to present to somebody. Are you producing science or are you producing entertainment? What are you doing?
Exactly. And that's exact. My event. Like I said, we changed it to a Paranormal Expo because we don't want people groupers. And it's about the community. We got people that's coming in that are equipment builders. They're going to be there. We got people. I got the guy. I got the cryptozoologist coming in. We got people that's talking about. It's about. And I only charge. Most of these events charge like $40 to get in. I charge $10. You get a wristband. You can come and go as you want. We have 40 vendors. And that's what it's about. And then, like I said, 25% of it goes to charity. I mean, I say I've been investigating for 35 years. Well, I lost 3 years of investigating. I lost 3 years from everything because I had to have brain and spine surgery. So I've only been back for 5 years. I have a non-curable neurological condition that very few people know anything about, including doctors. I suffer from Chiari malformation, is what it's called. So 25% of my proceeds go to Chiari research.
That's great. And but I mean, we're talking and we're giving our ideas on, how things can improve, and we're trying to be realistic about, the state of research and all that sort of stuff. But like I said, ultimately you can't tell other people what to do, and people are getting listen to you or not. And I think ultimately, when you start to not enjoy it, when you start to feel bad about, that's when you need to step back. In the UFO world, it is political stuff that's just not fun. It's just not. There has to be at least some sort of fun element. Not to say that you have to believe everything and make it all a big joke, but it is. These are communities, and these are also. There's a lot of interesting stories. And there are cultures out there, and there's a lot of art being created, and a lot of people interacting with each other that I think we could support each other, but we also need to challenge each other, especially the stuff that is going to be damaging. Let's just be more adult, I mean, it's
yeah. And the sad thing is, there's a lot of the paranormal field, the ghost aspect has dealt with a lot of the political and stuff. And one of the reasons I took the Paracon out of the name of my event is because unfortunately there's a segment of people out there that use Paracons for swinger conventions.
Well, there's within the UFO world, there's a hidden sort of history within all of these cultures, but I've been around for 48 years within the UFO subject, so there it's human being, and
all right, so
there's going to be good ones, bad ones, people with all different kinds of ideas of things, and there are stories over the years of different things, but
so let's move away and talk a little bit more about the field. We already know, not that they give one of us a pat on the back, but we know we're some of the good guys on the field. We do it for the research and educate people. We don't do it for money or to sleep with somebody else's wife or anything. So anyway, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about. We've talked a little bit about UFOs. We talked a little bit about ghosts. So let's talk a little bit about the cryptid side. Let's start with, like the ones in our area. So obviously, like I mentioned earlier, I've actually, I hate the word hunt because it ain't like I'm actually going to shoot them like I would a deer. But I've actually been on a dogman investigation, I guess, because the dogman is famously from the LBL,
Right.
and he's also another interesting thing about dogman is I mentioned my investigation earlier at Katie's, Kentucky. The investigation I did at Katie's was at an abandoned seed mill that was built by Hungarian POWs for World War II. And the place is abandoned. It's still completely original. Nothing's been touched on it. It still has the tunnels where they used to sneak them in and out, and they used to beat them and all that stuff. But the place is also rumored to be where the dogman bids. So when I was there, I did not find any evidence of that.
Yeah, I'm not like a super big like cryptid hunter. Like I've been out in the woods and I've been into different places, and I've been to Momo and Murfreesboro, Mud Monster, all the classic locations. And I've interacted with some of the original witnesses, appeared in some documentaries relative to those. And so I've investigated a lot of stuff around in Missouri, Southern Illinois, Kentucky, the area around here. Southern Illinois especially, because that's where Lauren Coleman started his career. So I retraced all of the Lauren Coleman cases, famous ones from the 70s, and have GPS position. You can find a lot of my GPS photography, location photography on Instagram. But I've gone to like the Enfield Horror and a lot of these other Lauren Coleman places. Also over in Missouri, a lot of the cryptid stuff, and there's like the Seymour Wolf. I investigated that, but Land Between the Lakes is one of my favorite spots. I've been there on numerous occasions. There are original Dogman, I guess. There's the Beast of Bray Road, and there's ideas what people have of like werewolves, and then there's like the Beast Between the Lakes, and they sort of get mixed up between they're not necessarily all the same thing, and there've been different claims. The Beast of Bray Road has had spiritual elements and whatnot, but the Land Between the Lakes is interesting because it's more of these tales are of like attacks, and the whole. I find it funny that there's like a Lake Barkley, which is like a dog barking, and it's like there's Dogman tales there as well. But it's where like the Vampire Hotel was, and there's haunted a slave
Hotel
area.
California.
All within the Land Between the Lakes. There's the trucker of the Trace that was supposedly seen. It's a mad trucker. I wrote about this mad trucker that follows people down the Trace, and he disappears behind you. But that's an interesting place. It's there have been claims of monsters in the water, which doesn't necessarily make sense because it's a man-made.
Yep.
But these tales are all
interesting,
connected, and they're always going to be connected to that location.
Well, what was interesting about LBL, like you said, you have to think about just the energy from there, because there was towns there. They were little
Right.
bitty towns, but they had churches, they had stores, and then they were just told one day that you don't
Right.
live here anymore. And
Yeah, there were farming communities, African American communities. There's cemeteries under there.
Yeah, like Berkeley has a cemetery underneath it. They just flooded it. They didn't move the body. They didn't relocate the bodies or anything. They just flooded it. So to me, one of the most interesting stories in LBL, and I've actually investigated it a couple of times now. Unfortunately, thanks to the last thing of flooding, the road to get to it is now permanently closed. But is the Hotel California? Hotel California. So growing up, I used to go party at Hotel California because that's what we do in West Kentucky. So I've always been told, there's no activity at Hotel California. Well, come to find out that the people who said that there was no activity just didn't have the right skill set and the equipment to get it. Because we went there 2 years ago now, and we got all kinds of crazy equipment and it's activity, and it's stuff like we already discussed. I tried to debunk anything before I presented those. So we're just walking around exploring, and unfortunately, people trash the area and stuff. But so the there was four of us that went. So I was still walking around checking out the downstairs. But all three of the other ones decided to go on upstairs. So I'm actually having a pretty good EVP session with whoever it is I'm talking to. And so I ask if I can go upstairs because that's how I investigate. I'm a very, I talk to the spirits just like I'm talking to you. So I ask if I can go upstairs, and it says no. So then it tells me to leave, and I'm like, I explain that I'm just there to hear their history and to tell their story, and I ask them if I can stay, and the exact answer I got was. And I remember it. I took a picture of the response. And just the way they said it, just kind of sent chills through me because I was explaining that we were just there to tell their story, and the response I got was, "I fear it is too late for that."
Yeah, but anyway, that's interesting.
That's my point.
Yeah, I've been up to the Hotel California. I did hike up to the Vampire Hotel at the other bottom end that was connected to that vampire cult back in the 90s.
Yep.
But I have Vampire Hotel and Hotel California GPS'd. So they're interesting place out there.
It is. And see, the story behind Hotel California is it was originally built as a summer home by a guy. He was a riverboat captain, and that was supposed to be his retirement home. So he builds this nice house. It's his dream house, and he's told he can't live there. And so just think about the energy from all that. All those people that was forced to move, and yeah. So a little bit more about cryptids, like you said. That's neither one of us big. On Mainfield anyway. So, but going back to Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call them. So, my theory is, and of course it's just a theory, that like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, even the Yeti are like kind of the different species of the same main species. You know what I'm saying? So but anyway, there's a I guess there's a popular theory going around right now that maybe instead of Bigfoot being a cryptid, he's actually more like an alien or interdimensional being.
Yeah, that theory has been around since the 70s. I mean, all those old UFO magazines played with, interdimensional Yetis. We saw Sasquatch on a $6 million Man, and he was a robot alien, right? So we can all speculate.
He looked a lot like Andre the Giant.
Yeah, he did. Remarkably. But we can speculate, and there are certainly stories within the lore of UFO encounters with Bigfoots, and people seeing other things with Bigfoots, and Bigfoot, supernatural Bigfoot, where like a Bigfoot like does either disappears or does like that predator thing, right? Which is like, okay, that's interesting. There are claims like that out there. I think Dogman is an interesting thing. I think it's probably more lore based, like that LBL story of the family getting ripped apart. There's not too much.
See, I remember that. I remember that being presented on the news.
Right,
I really do.
I would love to hear more about it. There should be the name of the family out there somewhere. I've looked. I know the location where it took place, but
me too. I've been there.
I want more information.
It's been right from history.
Yeah, but it's just evolutionary wise, it's kind of hard to see, the werewolf human thing or whatever. But Bigfoot, I think, like an upright hominid, some sort of human ape hybrid or whatever. Out of all the different paranormal stuff, even UFOs, there's probably more Bigfoot evidence out there, like actual physical evidence, than there is for ghosts, than there is for UFOs, because photographs and videos, that's secondary evidence. Evidence is like a piece of a UFO or a piece of an alien. You don't have that with ghosts necessarily. You might have like angel hair or ectoplasm or whatever, but that stuff usually turns out to be nebulous. But with Bigfoot, there's been blood, there's been hair, there's dermal ridges. That is scientific evidence that suggests that there is some sort of, at least in some places, rural places, very rare, possibly an upright human ape hominid, maybe a variety of species. I don't think we really know how rural. Some of those places out there are 1 million square miles of no people.
Yeah,
so
we're discovering new species all the time. So why this mess?
Yeah.
And, to me, and like you said, the thing with the dog man goes back to the media thing. Somebody made a film and said the dog man of the LBL. To me, like you said, I believe the creature in the LBO is probably just a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. I don't think it's a dog man. Like you said, just from looking at it from a scientific and medical aspect, it just makes more sense. So it is interesting. But we're almost at our 2 hours, so let's discuss. Let's do something that's kind of different. I've never done this before, but I'm enjoying talking to you so much. I just want to get your aspect of this. So do you know much about the Urine Shrine?
The what shrine?
Urine, URAN.
URAN. No. Is it like a prehistoric megalithic site or a mound site?
So. Well, let me show you the video. So this is the video. So next week, as we discussed earlier, I guess as most of my viewers know, I'm going to actually be at Smoky Mountain Terrier. So the VIP experience is you actually get to investigate at the shrine. So I'm actually going to be doing the podcast live. Okay. I'm actually going to be doing the podcast live from the shrine on Friday. So the history for the shrine is it's built like a Turkish shrine, like a Hindu shrine or whatever. But they actually allow all religious views. So they have Wiccan in there. They have satanic worship. They have everything. And so somehow all this mixed energy has created activity, and not all the activity is necessarily friendly. So that's where I'm going to be. So let's watch this video, and we'll just discuss it a little bit more.
place between worlds.
Witness this rite.
Are you ready to start a session on this Ouija board that belonged to serial killer Nathaniel White?
I am.
Any spirits in here with us right now? Can you tell us your name?
I feel like we're right there. I just...
Right here.
It was all a dream. Cool.
All right, so that's the shrine. That's what I'm going to be broadcasting right now. It's interesting. I actually know some people within the community and even within my team. I actually have a satellite member of my team. He's a satellite member because he lives on the other side of Kentucky. He lives out by Lexington, but he's actually like, I'm staying away from that. He's like, good luck with that. But I personally, there's no location that I'm afraid to investigate. To me, as we discussed earlier, I was born with abilities or gifts, whatever you term you want to use. I view them as gifts now. I didn't necessarily view them as gifts growing up, but nowadays I look at them as gifts. And to me, those gifts were given to me from God, and He gave them to me to use. So so I'm not. But anyway, whenever I go to a location, I take precautions. I do a prayer of protection and communication before I go in, and I do a prayer. I do a prayer of detachment before I go out. So I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of any location. My team, we actually still do residential investigations. People can still call us, and we'll go to their house to help them. Sadly, a lot of teams don't do that anymore. And but I say that to say that I know there's teams out there that still do residential, but they won't go to a house that's possibly demonic or malicious. And I'm like, why? I'm like, it's our job to help these people. If you're afraid to go in, what are you telling them? So yeah. So, but yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting. I really don't know how it's gonna go. I've never done a live on location podcast yet, so it's gonna be interesting.
Something will probably happen. More than likely, it'll be electronic, right? Or something in the background when you're not. Or if you're lucky, if something overt happens, sometimes. Activity seems to activate certain things. It's a roll of a dice. It's all about trying to minimize that roll, because you want to try to figure out what's going on. You want to experience what's going on, for one. You want to try to document what's going on, and if there is something malevolent, and if it fits, and if it's appropriate, and if the people that live there are cool with it, then ritual aspects are certainly something to explore. I try to take it more of a distant sort of documentary and scientific viewpoint on a lot of things, but just from doing this over the years, UFOs, ghosts, whatever, I've seen every kind of approach. I've seen scientific programmatic stuff where they planned out for years, and I've seen psychic activities and seances and Estes methods and a variety of different technologies used and rituals used at different places. I participated in some, just like midnight blood moon ritual, the Devil's Crossroads in Mississippi. I've done that. So, people can call me a skeptic or whatever, but, I've tried different things, and you have to try different things and experience these different things. And sometimes there are some intriguing things and some malevolent things. And even within like the UFO world, there's sort of this idea that ghosts, UFO, aliens, crypto, whatever you want to say, all of these, these amorphous phenomena, I guess you could say, these anomalous things, they're non-human intelligences from somewhere. And some of them may be negative, and that's just made, how we say the word demon. Who knows?
So yeah, exactly. Usually I do like a couple of speed rounds in my podcast, but those are more focused towards the ghost aspect. But eventually, of course, we discussed demonic, and the thing about demonic entities is the first thing is demonic entities actually go back before the Bible. Everybody always tries to make, but it goes back before that. But to truly be demonic, it was never human. That's what people have to understand. True demonics, and then the more the malicious, so true demonic activity is less than 1% of any activity. So people have to understand that. People try to say, "Oh, you just don't." I'm like, I'm trained. I was like, I'm a trained demonologist. I was like, how can I not believe in it if I'm trained in it? You know what I'm saying? But like you do have a lot of malicious spirits. And it's like I tell people, you have to remember when it comes to malicious spirits, if somebody was a dickhead when they were alive, they're going to be a dickhead when they were dead. You have that a lot. I ran into that at a location in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. It's a location they thankfully don't allow investigations at anymore because it's a violent haunting. I mean, but they want it that way. They want it, like you were saying earlier. Sometimes the atmosphere and everything makes it that way. They want this place to be violently haunting because there's five verified suicides in this hotel. Of the 5 verified suicides, and as we always stated, I protect my reputation. So when I say verified, I'm talking about I verified it with the coroner report, and I verified it with the newspaper, and I verified it with the police report. So the 5 verified suicides. Out of these 5 verified suicides, they still have three of the bloodstained mattresses. They still have a bloodstained bathtub. And then the 5th one is the one that I'm going to talk the most about because it's the malicious spirit. So the first thing to understand about this location is it's the Anderson Hotel. The first thing to understand about it is I said hotel, but it's not a hotel. It's not a hotel like the Hilton or the Ramada or even the Motel 6. It's the Transit Hotel. You know what I'm saying? So it's a Transit Hotel. So that's the first thing you got to understand. The second thing is, like I said, they want it to be violently haunted. So they closed it down for 3 years because of it being violently haunted. In the 3 years where they had it closed, they decided to open up a haunted attraction in the building, like a haunted house. So, which, by the way, for the people out there thinking about doing that, it's never a good idea to put a haunted house in an actual haunted location. But anyway, so they decided to do that. I mean, I understand it. You got to make money. I'm not judging people, but so they decide that they're going to paint a voodoo symbol in the doorway. So but they didn't research. They just picked out one that looked cool. Well, the one that they happened to pick was a symbol to open up the gates of hell.
Oops.
Yep. Whoops. I mean, it does look cool, but I mean, anyway. So you have to realize that. So anyway, we go and I'm going to go over these first two rooms quickly because they're important, but they're not really important to the story. The first one we come to is the one with a bloodstained mattress. The story behind it was this 33-year-old mother checked in the hotel basically just to commit suicide. Her husband and her two kids had just got killed in a mining accident, and she checked in just to commit suicide. So her bloodstain's still on there. So then the next room we came to is probably actually the most famous room. It's just known as a suicide room. The story behind it is probably one of the most tragic stories I've ever heard in my 35 years of investigating. This 19-year-old girl, this 19-year-old girl came all the way from Michigan to this little town in Kentucky. Nobody really knows much of her backstory besides that. But she checks in, and for some reason with crayon, again, we don't know why with crayon, she starts drawing sketches of like mountains and streams and stuff, and then she write Bible verses on the bottom of it, and she'd hang them in her room. Well, all those pictures are still there, and then she ends up cutting her wrist and committing suicide, and her bloodstained mattress is still there. So then we get to the important room to the story. They call it the Blue Room, and this guy lived there. We come to find out his name was John. He lived there. He was alcoholic. He drank himself to death. All of his liquor bottles are still there. And they encourage you to bring a liquor bottle for John. Well, we don't do that because that's provoking, and we don't provoke the spirits. But anyway, so we get there. And so come to find out, John was not only alcoholic, he also ran prostitutes in and out of the hotel. So like I said, so anyway, we end up, we switch and the girls end up coming up there. I still have this EVP. It's one of the best EVPs I ever got. So my niece is on my team. And at the time of the investigation, she was 19. So for whatever reason, she decided to use the prostitute thing as her way to start communication. So she goes up there and she's like, I'm 19 and cute. Can I have a job? The response that we got was $50 and free room. Just like that, $50 and free room. So anyway, long story short, the girls keep doing their investigation. Eventually, John grabs Tiffany in her private area. And at that point, we end the investigation because it's a safety issue. But so you can have malicious spirits without, but not necessarily demonic, but malicious.
I've heard that exact story in different places of a prostitute ghost, slapping or caressing certain men. Some places with the prostitute story legend only will interact with men, or they will only attack females because they say it's an interesting sort of thing. And it's interesting when you have different places that have the same sort of lore to it, and they're not connected. It's fascinating.
Right, exactly. So let's wrap up. Thank you for being on the show. It was good to get to know you better.
You too, man.
Tell everybody where to find you on Instagram and all that stuff. And,
okay. Well, I'm a researcher, and you can find me mostly on all the social medias out there, your Twitters and your X's and your Facebooks and your Instagrams. My name is Michael Huntington. I don't have any active websites or anything going on right now. I do have a movie on Tubi called Grand Tower, UFOs and Other High Strangeness, about a spot with localized activity and other stuff. But if just type my name and UFOs or ghosts or Bigfoot or whatever, and you'll find some stuff. I've done a lot of podcasts and different shows over the years, but Instagram's a good place if you're interested in haunted spots and all that. There's a lot of that up there, but
so
that's me.
Again, thank you for being on here. I'm going to throw out another invitation for you that's a little bit closer to your neck of the woods. But when we're at the Glen House, you're welcome to join us for the investigation.
I've been there. I've investigated with a few famous people. Ghost Hunters, I think, was there at one time. Even I've investigated with a few notable researchers. There will be some UFO and ghost people coming here into Cape. I think there's a couple conferences this year, and of course, the Glen House always has. They're open and they will tell you their ghost stories, and they do allow for different ghost hunting conventions, I think, in there from time to time. So,
and then, like you said, there's several conferences in Cape. Of course, the big one's the big one's Cape Con, and I'm actually speaking there this year. So you need to come check it out. Yeah, come hear me make a fool out of myself or whatever. But anyway.
You'll be fine. Just people talking, right?
I'm going to be talking about the scientific method of investigating. That's my topic.
Okay, cool. Yeah, localize. Get those cameras set up and do it long term and get serious, people. Or not, or don't get serious. You want to do.
But anyway, thank you for being on. We'll stay in touch. Well, we talk all the time anyway, but we'll stay in touch about maybe you coming to the expo and stuff. And I really do want. We really do need to make the Ditto House work, because, like I said, that's the trifecta, as they say. It's got UFO experiences, it's got Bigfoot experiences, and it is actually the most haunted location in Kentucky, even over Waverly and Mackey's, Of course, Mackey's is torn down anyway, but anyway, it's a good location. But anyway, we'll talk about all that later. Everybody have a good night.
Thanks.
Everybody, keep me in your thoughts and prayers this week as I travel, and tune in to next Friday at the shrine. I have no idea what to experience. Hopefully it goes good though, and we'll see everybody next week. Bum, bum, bum.